DungeonTube isn't dying. I just want to dispel that myth right off the bat. You know, and I'll get into an easy fix for it here later in the podcast. But DungeonTube's not dying. That is a very ugly rumor that got perpetuated by good old Professor Dungeon Master over on DungeonCraft. It's just, oh my goodness, guys. Tabletop role-playing game YouTube is not dying. DungeonTube is not dying. It's evolving, sure. I mean, the older, bigger channels are starting to lose some of their relevance as time goes on. What people are getting wrong is the audience has not disappeared. People did not stop caring about tabletop role-playing games. Views didn't just vanish into thin air. It's not the algorithm. It's not anything YouTube is doing. Again, very simple fix for this coming right up. The hobby is still alive and thriving. I mean, conventions are going probably stronger than I've ever seen them, or at least stronger than I've seen them in the last probably 5 or 6 years. You know, it's not falling apart. It's not as bad as the gloom and doom that some people are sensationalizing. What's actually happening is new creators are showing up hungry. I mean, I'm watching channels blow up from just started to 2,000 subscribers or 3,000 subscribers in like a month. I mean, and I find 2 or 3 new channels for the OGGM at least once a week. I go through and I have so many new channels popping up on my feed. It's ridiculous. I love it. And a lot of them are D&D channels, and not all of them last that long, but it's just amazing to me how fast they blow up. These new creators, you know, they're excited to talk about the game or whatever game it is. So if it's D&D, Daggerheart, Draw Steel, Dragonbane, Morkborg, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I apologize. You know, any of these. And these new guys, they show up and they talk about the stuff that, you know, the big DungeonTubers were talking about 5 years ago. So they're talking about character builds. They're talking about story arcs. They're talking about GM advice. They're talking about table dynamics. You know, they're talking about actual play culture without all the polish fatigue. You know, I keep finding all these new channels that get 0 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 or more even faster than some of the other channels. And these are TTRPG channels. These aren't, you know, I mean, a lot of them are D&D, but they're not video games or anything else. They're literally just TTRPG channels of some kind. And that doesn't happen if the audience is gone or if there's no interest in the subject. Let's go back a ways and talk about, you know, back in 2017 through about 2019, and then we'll get into 2020. Big DungeonTubers were exciting. Like, I remember I used to sit at work and pop on, you know, I'd listen to Ginny D in the background, or I'd watch Professor Dungeon Master over on DungeonCraft, or Luke on DM's Lair, or even Ted from Nerd Immersion. Like, I used to watch him. Bob World Builder. I remember when Bob was a new channel. I remember when Dungeon Coach was just talking about D&D all the time and not anything else. So yeah, I remember when Bob World Builder was new. I remember when D&D Shorts was just getting started and getting big, and he was really pleasant to watch back then. You know, and they had fresh ideas, and they were doing all these class builds, and they were talking about, you know, optimizing subclasses, and they were talking about building terrain and building adventures and world building and weird GM tricks, and you know, we had community conversations going. I remember when Diana of the Rose started, actually, come to think of it. You know, and I'll try to link some of these people down below so you can see who I'm talking about. But, you know, I mean, we actually had conversations going as a community, and people weren't bashing as hard on the quote-unquote big names. And somewhere along the way, the energy just kind of fizzled out and faded. And content became repetitive, and channels started pulling content from each other all the time, and then the sponsorships took over. And we'll talk a little more about sponsorships here in a minute, because that's another kind of gory subject with me. Let's get into the shill cycle, as I'm calling it. You know, these guys, they come in with a big punchy hook, like DungeonTube is dying, and I'm not, no shade on the professor, I'm just using it as an example. And then they mention Patreon, and then they talk about their Kickstarter or their buddy's Kickstarter, and then they talk about all their convention appearance stuff, and then we might get like 5 minutes of advice, maybe if we're lucky, and then we'll get an outro with more selling of various products if the entire video wasn't just about selling a product. And I want to put a caveat on that. Now, I'm pretty well known for backing Free League Publishing and Dragonbane and Gates of Crystalia and some of these other things. I'm a huge fan of Kwood Publishing, but that doesn't mean that I've like sold out to those guys. It just means that I've found a product that I'm really excited to talk about, and I love talking about role-playing games. That's kind of the whole point of Jeff's Game Box, is to have, you know, all these new games that would show up in my box every week and talk about them. Just because I love role-playing games, and I love talking about the industry and the hobby and everybody in it. That's where we're at with the channel. But anyway, going back to the whole shill cycle, you know, content stopped being the focus. Suddenly, it was all about the marketing. And it's all about whatever Wiley Marketing decides they want to push this week. Or it's about whatever convention appearance that we just had, or the swag we picked up at said convention. I want to call out some specific patterns here. Hopefully I won't go off on too much of a tangent. But you've got the endless Wizards of the Coast hype cycle. And, oh my goodness. With the way Wizards of the Coast has been lately, I mean, just over the last couple of years, since about 2023, with the great Dungeons & Dragons open gaming license debacle of 2023. I just love calling it that. WotC tried to basically pull out the big screw on content creators and really the entire D&D community, especially people that were making anything for the game. That was a really tense month. We were all glued to YouTube. We were all glued to the news, various news outlets. Well, tabletop role-playing game news outlets, not regular news outlets, although NPR did cover it. You know, and we were all freaking out because we thought this for sure was going to be the end of being able to create freely for a game that we all loved and that we all enjoyed and we all enjoyed making content for. Eventually, WotC rolled it back, and that was cool. And the big channels that blew up as a result of that particular debacle, or stayed large because of that particular debacle, continued to grow and grow. And a lot of them branched off and now have their own TTRPG that's completely separate from D&D, and good for them. But basically, we started getting these 20-minute ads that were disguised as commentary. You know, I can remember, and I'm going to pick on Kelsey for just a minute. Hopefully she'll forgive me for this. But, you know, Shadow Dark came out, and suddenly, like, 5 different channels that I really enjoyed all started talking about Shadow Dark. And some of them were kind of out of the blue, like, how in the heck did you even get a hold of this? Well, turns out that Kelsey sent around some preview copies for free to various DungeonTubers, whether they had a big name or not. And they all picked up on it. You know, that was how Shadow Dark kind of blew up. And the Kickstarter for Shadow Dark went over $1 million. We've had a lot of rapid gear shifts that mirror Wizards of the Coast's various flubs, most of them stemming back to the OGL debacle of 2023. I can't count the number of games that have come out in the last 2 years that were caused by people simply wanting to get away from that open gaming license and stop doing direct D&D related content and just do their own thing. And I think that's awesome. I mean, I kind of shifted gears that way too, but not to the point where I have my own game out or anything, because again, I think the last thing the industry honestly needs right now is a new role-playing game, especially a new fantasy role-playing game. And I'm not talking about TTRPGs, I'm not talking about science fiction or anything else, but the fantasy genre right now is so oversaturated, which is a discussion for another time, and I'll definitely get into that somewhere down the road. But yeah, right now, I don't want to sit through a 20-minute ad on YouTube for Nimble or for Chepeku or for Love You Guys But World Anvil is another example. You know, like, I don't want to sit through videos that relate so well to the sponsor that I can't tell that I'm not watching an ad for the sponsor. A lot of my own personal shout outs to various games, again, goes back to the notion that, you know, I used to receive all kinds of new games or stuff I found interesting or just whatever I would run into when I was working in the game shop and throw it in my game box. And eventually I would pick it up and I would go through it and I would talk to people about it because there's a lot of neat stuff there. But that loss of consistency and trust on YouTube that we've been seeing here in the last year or so is because I think, at least, these guys have sold themselves to either a talent agency or just one specific company, cough, Wizards of the Coast, cough, or some other interest besides just making cool content for the game. You know, I don't, when I click on a lot of this stuff now, I don't trust it. Like, especially live streams. Live streams to me are kind of not the way of the future because I don't like sitting through 45 minutes of thanking the patrons and hearing about Patreon and thanking the super chats and thanking all the people that have showed up to the live stream. And pretty soon you're 45 minutes into a video and wondering what you clicked on. I don't do it anymore. You know, and a lot of these creators that used to be a lot of fun to listen to and a lot of fun to watch have really shifted into either, like I say, the sponsor, the shill cycle, or they've just plain started gatekeeping and they shout down new, not necessarily directly, but they shout down the new DungeonTubers, they shout down anybody using AI. They shout down anybody using AI for anything. So, I mean, if you want to keep creators small and you want to complain about AI slop over on drivethrurpg.com or DM's Guild, you know, it's not the message you really want to send. And I'm picking on one. I mean, I hate to tell you this, Holmes, but not all of us have a $3.2 million Kickstarter and can just hire an artist whenever we want one. Sorry, I can't do that for my blog, and I sure as heck can't do that for my my Dragonbane content that I publish. I can't do it. Like, there just comes a point where I have to lean on the tools that I have available to me. And again, that's another video entirely. I'm not going to go off on that whole AI thing right now. These guys are punching down, constantly punching down. And I mean, again, not necessarily directly, but I'm sorry, we can't all have, you know, 800,000 followers on subscribers on YouTube, and I don't know how many thousand followers on Instagram, and we can't all, yeah, I mean, some of y'all people are talking to like a completely different tax bracket than the one you're in. Seriously though, you know, I can't afford a $5,000 Wormwood table, you know, that's got like LED TV inlaid into it and cup holders for everybody and all that fancy stuff and chairs to go with the whole thing. I can't afford it. And watching some of y'all parade around, I mean, even with your convention swag, parading around with your convention swag, like, I can't do it, guys. I haven't been to a convention in 20 years because I can't afford it. They're called kids. I have 4 of them. They're expensive. They make it very hard to get away for a weekend. Sometimes they make it very hard to record a YouTube video. Happens. That's life. And that's being an adult, I guess. Adulting. And, you know, just seriously, though, like, some of these DungeonTubers just act like they don't have a care in the world and they don't have any commitments and all they do is go to conventions and make convention appearances. And there's this one guy who I won't name specifically, but he hasn't made a video in like a year, but he's doing convention panels talking about how to be a big DungeonTuber. It's like, come on, dude, really? I'm sorry, but I don't see it. You know, to me, you know, hammering down on smaller creators does you no good. In fact, if anything, you should be trying to build up other DungeonTubers instead of blatantly ignoring them or treating them like they're dirt for whatever reason, AI or something else. You know, I will say one thing about Professor Dungeon Master over on Dungeon Craft is he's an upstanding guy. I've talked to him on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it a couple times, a little bit here and there, mostly publicly. I would love a private chat with Professor Dungeon Master if it ever happens, but because he's a neat guy. And again, Professor DM went from having really awesome advice and really awesome terrain building advice, really awesome after reports on his various games, whether they were at a convention or wherever. I used to really love listening to that. And if the professor happens to catch wind of this, I really used to love listening to Professor DM, talk about certain convention situations or certain game situations that he had, or certain players that did X, Y, and Z thing, and then like getting a little bit from Deathbringer, which I have my own little subtle shout out to Deathbringer coming up here sometime. And the good professor has now gone to what I would call more gated content. He's moving certain things over strictly to Patreon. And I mean, yes, he's right when he talked in his video about how DungeonTube is dying. He is right that I think 3D printing and just the fact that there are so many people making how-to terrain videos, either 3D printed or just in general, the old-fashioned way like we used to do with a styrofoam cutter and paint and things that we could scavenge up at the hobby store and whatever. And I don't blame him for going to Patreon with that stuff. I mean, yay for Patreon. I don't yet, but yay for Patreon. It's just I see more and more content going to Patreon, and I hear YouTubers, DungeonTubers talking Patreon this, Patreon that, and it's like, guys, I don't have money for half the stuff I want to do, much less Patreon for somebody. I mean, I would love to contribute to a half a dozen people, like, on a monthly basis. I can't afford it, and it's not like I got that kind of support coming in. By the way, I have a Ko-Fi, links down below. Not that I'm really worried about it. We used to have series content. We used to have all this cool stuff. And now a lot of the core ideas and a lot of even the like free PDFs are like, oh, hey, come link down below for my free PDF adventure, blah, blah, blah. And now it's Patreon. And I get that we all have bills to pay. Like, again, I said 4 kids. I get it. Okay. I want to make money too. I mean, and that's fine, but the gated content is starting to sound a lot like the same thing we criticized Wizards of the Coast for during the great OGL debacle, where it's like, oh no, all your content's locked behind a paywall on D&D Beyond, and then we had Stop the Sub, and a certain very well-known content creator got behind Stop the Sub publicly, and suddenly Wizards of the Coast kind of did the big and turned around and said, no, okay, wait, okay, we'll roll back the changes to the OGL, we'll behave ourselves. But unfortunately, a lot of these DungeonTubers, their stuff's on Patreon. It's like, that's not going to get rolled back anytime soon. Not that I necessarily need it to be or want it to be, but you definitely know who you are. If you're burying stuff in Patreon, it's like, you could have just as easily made it public as a, courtesy to people who watch your YouTube channel. It's doable. And I think, personally, gated communities kind of hurt the hobby, just because it does lead to more gatekeeping. And I remember Professor Dungeon Master's comment over on Ag about moving some stuff to Patreon, and suddenly people were like, yeah, screw those tourists, screw all the people that are just curious about the game. Let's just keep everything gated and gatekeeping, and just lots of talk about gatekeeping. And it makes me kind of ill, because I don't want to push people out of the hobby. I want to bring people into the hobby. If we don't bring people into the hobby, that's how the hobby dies. And we don't want to do that, because then we really will see DungeonTube dying along with everything else. Open tables built the space, I remember back in conventions, like if I had, time and we weren't too far into the adventure and somebody wandered by the table, I'd be like, hey, have a seat, have a character, here you go. Nowadays, and my perspective on this whole DungeonTuber thing is I'm a small channel. I had right around 140 subscribers the last I looked. It might be higher or lower next time I look, depending. I don't know how this video is going to do. I got no sponsors. I got no big Patreon to push. And like I said, I barely have a Ko-Fi, coffee, whatever you want to call it. You know, I've barely got a Ko-Fi or a coffee or whatever. I think I make about $5 annually off of it. Not that exciting. I mean, hey, if you want to contribute, awesome. Because I've definitely had my share of equipment issues lately. Computer. My phone's not getting any younger, which I know is kind of sad to say. Yay, consumerism, yay, late stage capitalism. But my phone is, it's not keeping up as well as it used to. In fact, it's overheating while I'm trying to make this video, or podcast. I recently got a better microphone, which is kind of ironic that I'm actually like recording this on my phone. But yeah, it's a little hard to get, you know, things to quiet down at home long enough to make a decent recording. I know, kind of sad sauce really, but I have, like I said, I have 4 kids and a wife, and when they're all home, it's loud. It's constantly loud, and that's when I'm not interrupted with a "Hey Dad" or "Honey, the toilet's plugged again," or whatever, you know. And that's just life. And that's not to say, I mean, I've got my own mental health struggles too, aside from having kids and a wife and all that good stuff. And while they're awesome, I still have my own issues that I'm dealing with. I've been unemployed since 2021, and I just really never recovered from that. So when it comes to DungeonTube, I'm not exactly speaking from authority, other than the fact that I watch copious amounts of YouTube every day. You know, I still watch a ton of Law of Attraction stuff. I still watch a lot of how-to YouTube stuff. I watch a ton of TTRPG content every day. So I'm speaking from some of my own experience and from just observation. You know, let's talk about selling for a minute, because I think that's an important tangent to all this. You know, DungeonTube went from, and YouTube, TTRPG YouTube to some extent, has gone from what can I show you, what can I tell you, you know, the kind of conversations we used to have in the back end of the game store after closing, or at the coffee shop after closing, you know, and we used to just kind of kick it around. And now it's like everything's about selling something to somebody, it seems like. I mean, personally, I'm not necessarily trying to sell you anything. I'll review a game here and there, and I definitely don't review things I hate. Decades of retail kind of burned me out on selling stuff, honestly. Like, I'll talk about a game if I like it, sure. If you've gotten mentioned on my blog or my channel, it's because I like your product, not because I necessarily want to sell it to you. Use your discernment. I always say that, like, you know, buy my stuff or don't buy my stuff. If you think you're getting value from it, or you think it's something you can use, and I certainly encourage you to go over to DriveThruRPG. I'm not putting that link down below for this very reason, you know, but use your discernment. Like, if you don't like it, you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. I'm not gonna shove it down your throat. It's not like I'm, you know, a big money deal. I've got some kind of deal with Wiley Talent Marketing, who told me that, you know, hey, come back to us when you've got like 25,000 views to 35,000 views, kid, then we will take you seriously. Just when it comes to my stuff, use your discernment. And when the stuff I talk about, use your discernment. If you think I'm full of crap, don't buy it. That's fine. Like, you're not gonna hurt my feelings by that. I will say that I think complaining about your lack of profits, either from AdSense or from your sponsorship, complaining about that to your audience just feels wrong. I mean, I wouldn't do it. Yes, I would love more subscribers, but I always try to keep that on the positive. You know, say what you want and say what you want to do, as opposed to the thing you don't want to see or don't want to do. And I know sometimes I kind of break that rule and it bugs me. It gives me a little bit of cognitive dissonance, because but it happens. You know, it's just kind of how we talk these days too. But, you know, use your analytics privately, you know, but I don't need to know that you lost money on this, that, and the other last video. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody specific. Again, I know the good professor shared some of his numbers, and that's fine, you know. I also see a lot of these how-to YouTube gurus talking about how much money they made in like a month, and it's staggering, but they make their money off of their course that they're selling or their coaching that they're selling, and not AdSense. AdSense money on YouTube is not much to write home about unless your channel is Mr. Beast or something along those lines, or unspeakable or somebody, you know, like if you've got a big money channel that does funny stuff, then yeah, cool. And back in 2020, these channels all, you know, all these D&D channels, all these DungeonTuber channels blew up because we were all trapped at home. And that's kind of the 2020 piece to all this, is those guys all blew up and now they're wondering why their views are falling off. Well, it's because you're doing all this silly stuff, like talking about your convention appearances and your sponsor and your buddy's Kickstarter and this and that and the other thing, and you're not talking about world building anymore, and you're not talking about how to create a better game anymore. You're just going on and on. It's like, but if you want to use your analytics privately, yeah, definitely do that. That's what all these gurus, all these YouTube gurus will tell you. Like, yeah, there's an advantage to analyzing your statistics. Don't shame us if we're not subscribed, if we're not giving you the number of thousands of views that you're looking for. Sorry, you know, it sucks. I feel bad for you, but at the same time, I feel kind of bad for me too. I wish I was kidding more. But and here's the other thing, and this is really where I wanted to get into. There is a very simple fix to all of your DungeonTube problems, okay? And I hope you guys have listened this far in, and thank God if you have. Thank goodness, thank the universe if you have. Because here's the deal. The algorithm is not against you. All of the YouTube gurus, all of the big DungeonTubers will tell you it is not the algorithm's fault. In fact, just replace the word algorithm with the word audience, because that's really what you're looking at. And that's the point I've been trying to drive home this whole time to these big DungeonTubers, is the problem with your analytics isn't your algorithm or where you're at in the algorithm. It is your audience. And if you're losing your audience, well, then you're probably losing your AdSense revenue or whatever else you've got tied to that particular video. You know, it's just that simple. And if you go back and you pretend you're a brand new DungeonTuber or a brand new YouTuber, you do the whole YouTube thing where you go back and look at your thumbnail and your title and your hook and your call to action and where you're putting your call to action. Look at how you're doing your video. Because yes, you might know the game. You might know Daggerheart. You might know Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. But if you can't do the YouTube, you're not going to make the money. And I think that's where a lot of people get discouraged and get this foolish notion that DungeonTube is somehow dying. It's not dying. Plenty of channels blow up all the time. It can be done. I would love it if my channel would blow up. That'd be really awesome sauce. But you know, hey, we'll get there. Anyway, that's what I had to say. You know, if you're a big DungeonTuber and you're not sure what you're doing, go check out. There are so many how-to YouTube channels, and I'll see if I can link a couple of them down below so people can go check it out. vidIQ, Think Media, Meredith Marsh is a really good one, by the way. Molly Kaiser, Sonny Leonarduzzi is more of the business side of things, but really great advice there too. But there's just hundreds. Kevin Colby, Brian G. Johnson. You know, there are all these guys that know how to YouTube and can tell you way better than I can the things you need to be doing. And a lot of these people will also sell courses, sell, you know, coaching and one-on-one mentorships and all that fun stuff. My point is, you're not doomed. You just need to maybe start looking at the how to YouTube stuff more closely. I've been doing that kind of research since before I ever started my channel, like about a year and a half before I ever started my channel. I just never quite stopped watching that content because a lot of it's really useful. You know, you can learn so much from these various, you know, how-to YouTuber channels. So instead of saying DungeonTube is dying, maybe, you know, face the facts that, you know, the audience has just moved over to other DungeonTubers. The audience has gotten fussier about what they will tolerate in terms of, you know, convention pitches and Kickstarters and Patreon and all this other stuff. It's like, if you want to move your stuff to Patreon, move your stuff to Patreon. Great, go for it. But that has nothing to do with your YouTube metrics at that point. Just be aware. Just a matter of doing the YouTube better. And if you like what I had to say here, I'll hopefully speak to you in the next one.